fans, Ryan Eho here, and the one and only Bert Lehman bringing you episode 175 of the One to Go show. Of course, this show, Bert, before we get into anything, brought to you by our friends over at Zeuli's Race Engines. WISSOTA season is here. That means what? Zeuli's Race Engines, parking it in victory lane. Whether you want to win races or championships, they have the speed and the durability to do both. If you can't beat them, join them. Zeuli's Race Engines. On today's show, Bert, our top 5 moments of the week. WISSOTA season's underway. I had a driver reach out to me and tell me the point system sucks. We'll talk about that. Some fan feedback, little who's hot and who's not. Our picks, bold predictions, as always. But let's start with our top 5 moments of the week. And before we do, a little shout out to these guys right here. Daytona 1 Performance Lubricants going to bring you this little segment. They actually starting a series, limited late models. They changed their name over in Western Minnesota, Bert. They got them. They're called the Gen X late models. They're actually the Daytona 1 Performance Lubricants Gen X late models at I-94 Speedway, Madison, and Montevideo. And they're working on putting together a 3-track series, an extra point fund going to the drivers over there as well. So they have a lot of great products, a lot of lubricants, you know, I mean, of course, Buck's in the Hall of Fame for NASA for lubricants, but I mean, anything from engine treatment to oils that you name it, but they have a tire treatment out there that can help the racer. It's controversial, I know, right? But the goal is to help the racer get more life out of their tires, get more nights out of their tires. If you want more information on a product that can help you get more life out of your really expensive tires, call Chad 507-828-3536. Get educated. There's a lot of rumors, a lot of speculation on it. Get the facts yourself. And if it's something that can help your race program, it's up to you if you want to try that product or not. So number 5, Bert, what do you got for number 5?
Well, we have Ebert's determination propels him to the point.
Let's flip that. Let's flip that around. That's number 1. That's number 1.
Oh, I'm looking at it wrong.
I did. That's my fault. That's my fault. I texted it to him in the opposite order of what I always did. So that's a donkey award to this guy right here for making Bert look bad. I apologize, Bert. That's my fault.
All right. We're staying with the modified ranks, so but the modified ranks converging with late models. And we've talked about this driver before, Ethan Dotson, actually quite a bit on this show about how good he is in a mod. Well, he won his first late model race in the Comp Cams action. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes from here.
He was close earlier this year. He was close. He almost got one done. But old number 1 Speedway in Harrisburg, Arkansas. Never even heard of that racetrack before, but I might have to check it out.
Yeah, I've never heard of that racetrack either. So, but it's good to see another modified driver in a late model, and we'll see where his career goes from here.
There you go, mod guy getting it done in the late model. Puka, it just sucks to be you, man. Mod guy's dominating. It's just the way it is. Let's go number 4. #Falls. I'm telling you what, that place simply does not disappoint. Mars late model action this past Saturday night. Bishop, a little bit of a dry spell with parking in victory lane. So close, yet so far away. The Moequa missile, Shannon Babb, holding off a late race challenge from Bishop and parking in victory lane. Unbelievable finish over there at Falls. Did you get a chance to watch that one, Bert?
Yeah, I didn't watch it live, but I did watch the replay. I went back to Flow and watched the. Normally, I just watch the highlights on Dirt on Dirt, but I decided I wanted to watch the entire feature for that one. So I did watch that, and you're right. I mean, Falls never disappoints. It's just amazing how they almost every race there is just good. I mean, top, bottom, middle, drivers racing all over the place.
And this is a product right here of streaming, right? You have a lot of people out there. There's two sides to this. People are like, oh, streaming's killing racing. Well, the Prairie Dirt Classic's been around for a long time. I never even heard of it really until the last couple of years. I mean, a lot of other people have. I had not until I saw Falls on, online with like Flow Racing and all that. I didn't really even know it existed. And I tell you what, I've seen a lot of good races there, and I'm going there the end of July for the Prairie Dirt Classic. Never would have stepped foot in the place if I wouldn't have seen it on live streaming. So that right there shows that live streaming can bring fans to new places. Little shout out to my buddy Dave there too, Bert. They didn't get the features in for the streeters, but 5th to 2nd in the heat race. He's going to start outside of row number 2 when they make that feature up. So things are looking up for the 83 ride. Number 3, Bert. Oh yeah, the Macho Man, the Macho Man, Brady Bacon. Did you ever hear of this cat? I know he's competed at the Chili Bowl. I've seen him in like some USAC type stuff.
I have not heard of him before.
So they call him the Macho Man, just a little guy, right? Just a little. That's all.
Well, I was going to mention that because when they interviewed him after the race, the guy doing the interview he looked like he was about a foot taller than what this guy was.
I think the guy has to stand on a step stool to look Kyle Larson in the eyes. I mean, he's a little guy, right? But so kind of like calling the fat guy slim, the Macho Man, probably not real macho, but he was macho. It was a bold move to take the lead. I mean, he was unbelievably fast the last 5 laps, and Brady Bacon became the 150th driver to win a World of Outlaws Sprint Car A main. This took place at Tri-State Speedway in Hobstadt, Indiana. Actually, I didn't race there, but I went there to a World of Outlaw race with a buddy of mine. Actually got my last car from him, Mark Bush. So I've been to that place, but unbelievable race there.
And yeah, I was just going to say that track is, I mean, at least that race, I mean, it's a very racy track, it looks like.
They had a 2-hour rain delay, and it was super, super, super heavy. And some of them cars, they were hopping and bicycling, and they were not able to turn. But it's actually, when I was there, the racing was really good. So I think the racing is good regardless, but there was a lot of moisture in it. So number 2, Bert.
The streak is over. The Shepherd finally reaches victory lane in the Longhorn. And I did notice on the back of a spoiler, it's Blistine in huge letters on the back of his spoiler now. And so we definitely know what shocks he's running now.
We're going to take some credit. So Brandon Shepherd actually owes us a percentage. We called him out on the who's not last week. Boom, lo and behold, parks it in victory lane. That's just kind of how it works. So if you're a racer and we call you out for being slow and kind of sucking it up, instead of being mad at us, thank us, because you're probably going to win next week. It's just kind of how it seems to work. So he put that Red Hill Raceway, Bert, up until that point, it was 40 straight races without a win. He was close. The couple before that, he got second. And the year before, they raced, and Turbo won a late model race there the year before. But before that, it was like 2004. So they had a big, long lull in there where they didn't even have races at this place at Sumner, Illinois, over there, Red Hill Raceway. So I found that interesting. Dan got me a little info on that. And then number 1, and we'll let you go back to number 1. You started that at 5. We'll bring it to number 1.
Dan Ebert takes over the point lead in USMTS, probably because I didn't pick him this week. So, and I had picked him the previous weekend in all 3 races. So I think that's why, I picked him. He loses the point lead. I don't pick him, then he moves back into the point lead.
So he's a Minnesota guy. We want him to win the points. So Bert, quit that shit. You got to quit picking old Ebert. So he's flexing, right? Flexing on the competition, throwing some kind of haymakers. Him and TBJ, Tom Berry Jr., earlier in that race, Tom Berry Jr. hit a rut, KO'd the side of Ebert for the race lead. Last lap, they take the white flag. They come into 1 and 2, and Ebert throws the haymaker, and he's like, well, I kind of had to finish that one, something like that. And when they talked to Tom Berry Jr. on a podcast, and wasn't real happy. He's like, I don't really, that was definitely intentional, but we talked about it last week, Bert, right? We're like, what drivers are going to do that bold move for a win? Like, we like that. So it's like, do we give Dan Ebert a donkey award for absolutely KOing him in the fence? Or do we give him a freaking pat on the back and a high five for having the balls to do it? You're here to win races. And now, Dan don't typically carve people into the wall, but I think he kind of felt that deal earlier in the race was, he felt Tom Berry Jr. maybe could have lifted. Depends how you look at it. So he figured, well, if he didn't lift, I'm not going to lift, and I'm going to win.
I mean, you always hear the saying from drivers. They always say that, I'll race people the way they race me. And if he felt like that's the way Barry was racing him, he's just making that statement come true.
He sure is. And, he's got a couple wins already this year. One of only a couple drivers to have multiple wins. Of course, Tom Berry Jr. won night 2. That's his second of the year as well. So Tom Berry Jr. night 1, I think he finished back in the 11th, because when they stayed green. When he got into the wall, he lost a whole bunch of spots, and otherwise it would have been 1-2 both nights, and didn't quite end up that way. So let's jump on to some WISSOTA racing action. The WISSOTA season is taking off out west. Multiple races happened out there. They raced at Casper for the second week in a row. Sheridan, Wyoming, they had a doubleheader. Electric City Speedway in Great Falls, Montana. So WISSOTA racing's happening. Y'all Minnesota, Wisconsin people, don't be jealous. North Dakota, okay, it's coming. It's coming. Not quite as soon as out there. But speaking of that area, a little shout out first, Brad Parson Ag Solutions. So if racing's coming, that means planting is coming, right? And for some people, planting might already be here. Well, if you want a great farming season, what do you need to have? The right chemicals in your spray packages. That's what Brad has. And if you're unsure, if you're like, man, I don't know if, I don't know if I want to change, well, give them a call. 320-219-3542. And he's got products that you can mix right with the current spray packages. He has all the data, the numbers from testing. Get the information. If it can help you be more profitable, more efficient in farming, why not give it a try? And he's a race car driver, so support those who are part of our group. So a little bit of news, and we're not going to get into all the results from these races, because we're going to do that this week on the recap shows. We'll talk about those here in just a little bit. But I did have a driver reach out to me, Bert, and I was kind of chatting back and forth, and I kind of give him a little grief. I said, the old silver bullet here, Dean Larson, 4 for 4 to start the year. It's a big deal, right? I think it's top 30 shows, maybe 25 on mod 4s. I'm not positive, but he made the trip 700 miles one way to Casper. Then he ran 3 shows out there this weekend, 4 wins, 4 nights. That's a pretty good head start to start the season. Well, he's like, wow, that's a bunch of BS. A couple of them nights, 3-4 cars. It's stupid. Well, his question was this. Do you think this point system that WISSOTA has in place now is flawed? Yes, I do. I think it's absolutely asinine. Okay. Now, I had nothing against the driver for going to race, but the point system. So, Bert, here's what it was before. So for years and years and years, it was 35 points to win the feature. And then it was 33 points for second and 1 point the rest of the way back. So essentially it was 34, 33, 32, and a bonus point for winning. Pretty simple, right? Now the significance to that is the show points. If you get 9 or less cars, you get 10 show up points. 10 to 15 cars, you get 11. 16 and over, you get 12. The significance with that 2-point separation was back 4 or 5 years ago, or however long it was when they had the last point system. If you won a feature with, say, 4 cars, right, you would get 35 points plus 10, so 45. We're going to not talk about the heat points because that's immaterial at this point. So it'd be 45 points, okay? Now it's a huge disparity. It is literally 5 points difference now between first and second. So a 3-car feature win is worth 3 more points than a second place if you have 80 cars. That's stupid, right? That's absolutely stupid. So the thing is, they got too much of a gap there which it might work good for the USMTS series if they have the same car count on a series every night. But when you got tracks that have 3-4 cars and tracks that have 30 cars, that don't work, right? You can't give somebody a huge advantage. And this happened a couple of years ago in the late models, right? With Searing and Becker, and neither one of them benefited because they both raced them tracks, right? But the fact is, Searing that year had 4-car, 5-car feature wins, and it's like, I guess they count towards the points and probably shouldn't, but it's stupid. For the life of me, I don't understand why they don't just go back to the old system. This new system, it just makes no sense. And it literally, it's almost embarrassing is what it is. So what's your thoughts on that, Bert? You maybe not be a points chaser, but if you get a feature win with 3 cars, should that really be worth more points than a 50-car second place finish?
Not necessarily. It's just, I imagine it's difficult to come up with a point system. I think IMCA, I think they do only a 1-point difference for every position. They don't have the 3-point difference between first and second. I mean, I definitely see your point. If you're only racing against 3 cars and you get X number of points and there's 50 cars there, yeah, theoretically that should be, a second place should be worth more than that.
And for years, a low car count clean sweep used to be the same points, equal points to a high car count second. So that made sense. So now you race 50 cars, you get second. That should be worth as many points as a first place with 3 cars. So they brought that up at the national meetings, and there was a few people that said, well, we should do a study on this. What do you mean a study? We don't need to do a freaking study. What the hell are you talking about? We know what the old point system was, and we can do math that don't even make sense. So with SOTA, board members, right? I don't know, promoters probably got to vote on this or whatever. This got to change. This is embarrassing. It's wrong. It has to change. It is just absolutely stupid. So, Bert, we got a few more questions here. Got Brent sent in some pretty good questions, and I got a question here from Jared as well. First, a quick shout out, buyraceshirts.com. Racing season's here. If you need apparel, hats, shirts, hoodies, you name it, buyraceshirts.com has all the products you need. They can get it to you in a timely fashion. They have all kinds of price points. Get a hold of the crew down there at buyraceshirts.com. So, Bert, Brent sent some questions there. I'll let you read them off. You printed them off. We'll go one by one here. What do you got?
All right. The first one is, in a sport like track, under some circumstances, they charge false starts to the field, and the next person false starting is disqualified. In racing, when things are getting out of hand with caution after caution, should the next charged caution driver be removed, even if they didn't cause a previous caution?
Do you have a thought on that? I do.
I do not think that the next caution driver should be removed, especially if obviously, if they caused a caution before and they caused another one, at least at Shawano Speedway, they would be done because 2 cautions.
2 yellows. Yep, 2 yellows.
But I don't think that just because all the other drivers are causing cautions and then you happen to cause one for the first time, I don't think that you should be eliminated from the race.
I kind of gonna go the opposite.
Okay.
So, and I learned this. So I remember racing over at the Norman County Raceway, I think it was, in Ada, Minnesota. And Paul Engelstad was the promoter over there, did a great job. Super nice guy. And they had a rule, it was called the 4 caution rule. So after 3 yellows, from that point forward, whoever caused the 4th one, black flag, right? And it is amazing, literally amazing, that when you know that you're going to get black flagged and you get spun out, you're stopped in the middle of the corner, wow, people get going again. It's kind of weird, right? Because how many times we see in some of these late model races, guys got a tire down. Well, I'm just going to pull off to the side. car ain't running right. I'm gonna pull off to the side of the track and stop. And they just bring out yellow after yellow after yellow after. It just pisses people off, right? So there's two sides to it, right? I mean, because there's gonna be times where you have that racing deal and 3 cautions came out and you just kind of had a little bit of an incident and it's like you're done. Too bad, I guess. It kind of sucks. I mean, I get that part of it because that's kind of unfair to some extent, but it speeds the program up. And my least favorite thing, Bert, one of my least favorite things in racing is a time limit. I remember going to the Viking Speedway back in the day, and I think they're going to actually be a little later time limit now for some of them specials, so stay tuned on that. But I remember going to a fall classic, and the race before us took forever. We get an 8-lap feature, right? 8 laps. They cut the laps. I would rather, if I had to choose, I would rather after 3 cautions start black flagging people to speed the program up. I'd rather do that than cut the laps from like a 30-lap feature to 8. So I can see both sides of it. Brent, that's a good question. And I think that, that it could go both ways. And I definitely see your point because sometimes some of these races, Bert, are marathons and we got 12 freaking yellows in certain races. It's like, just start getting these people off the track. But at the same point, if they're getting kicked off the track and they're new, they're not necessarily getting any better either. So you got to have some laps.
Right.
What do you have
All
next?
right. The second question, at the ERX Motor Park, which has more classes than the local dirt tracks, they have scheduled time for each class to run. Could local dirt tracks run a schedule like that? I think basically they're saying, okay, at 8:20, this division's going to be racing. 9:00. I don't think that you can do that.
In theory, right? In theory, it sounds like a good idea, but there's too many variables in there. I mean first,
look at the times when MAV TV has tried to do live coverage, and it does. They're trying to match up when the feature is going to start, and it just never happens.
It does. And I've seen times in UF2 where it's like you're sitting there for 20 minutes while they're trying to put in filler time to get to that 8:00 so
Right.
you can start the race. And so,
well, and the Chili Bowl this last year, the actual feature didn't start until after, if you went to your TV guide, if you would have recorded the race according to when it was supposed to be on, you wouldn't have got the feature because the feature started after it was over. That time slot was over.
Right. I understand the question. I don't think it would be viable. I mean, I think one of the biggest things is don't have programs with 6, 7 classes. Let's just start there. But I think that keeping the program just efficient and trying to stay on track is a good idea. Making it happen is there's just too many variables usually.
Well, right. I mean, you don't know how many cars are going to show up. If a bunch of cars show up, it's going to be impossible.
And one wreck, right? Somebody rolls over. You could have a 20-minute yellow because of. I mean, so there's a lot of variables. I understand the question, but I think it'd be a little easier said than done.
All right. The third question: could there be a performance metric based on the tracks themselves, least cautions, most passes, etc., that would determine who gets to hold special events like the WISSOTA 100?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I mean, if you look at all the racetracks, and there's some pretty good ones out there, right? I think it's at the best track right now. I mean, as far as WISSOTA racetracks go, I mean, I-94's got the facility. The racing was good.
That's the big thing. You need it to be at a track that has a facility that can house that many race cars. I mean, that was one thing when we would, when MJ would go to the WISSOTA 100 every year when it was at Cedar Lake Speedway. I mean, there were 300 some super stocks and 100 mods, and you need a facility that's going to be able to get all those haulers and trailers parked.
Yeah, there's really not many, but as far as if a sanctioning body's holding a race, I think they definitely want to hold it to a higher standard, and I think that's part of the process when they kind of, I don't want to call it go for bids because they really don't. But when they talk about where they're going to have the 100, they talk about all those things. So I think that's kind of already in place. So yeah, I would agree that yes, I mean to some extent that needs to happen. I don't exactly know all the metrics behind everything, but I think that a lot of them things we talked about are considered when making that decision.
Right. And I mean, you definitely want the race to be at a racy racetrack. You don't want it to be at a track where there's not going to be any passing and that sort of thing.
For sure. You got one
All
more
right.
there?
Yeah, one more. Would it make sense for drivers on low budgets to only run a car once every few weeks where they can go all in with spending for that particular year?
Once every few weeks or once every few years?
Oh,
Or
a few
once every-
years. I'm sorry, few years. Yes.
Boy, I thought long and hard about that one. So basically what he's asking is, if you have it, would it be better for people to race like saying this year 2023 and just go gangbusters, race as much as they can, and then take a couple years off to replenish and then get after it again? I don't know. I don't think so, because I think you get rusty, right? I mean,
Well,
I think that's part of it.
that and drivers are out there because they have the ambition and the desire to race. And, if you take that away for a couple of years, it's, I think drivers, even if they're not going to be at the top level, they still want to race because it's in their blood.
For sure. And take it from me, right? I thought for sure I was going to take a year or two off. Well, it's been freaking 10, right? I ran 1 year for Duval in there, but that's it. I mean, once if you get out of it, you start getting other hobbies and doing other things, pretty soon you're going to be like, well, I'm having fun here. See, here's the key. Racing it's always been super expensive. Always. Racing costs the same today as it did 25 years ago. It takes every dollar you have, right? So that's the cost is the same. But here's the key. At a certain point, and Chad and Clint talked about it on our Blast of the Past show, here's the deal, is when the amount of fun you have no longer is high enough to justify the dollar you're spending, well, then you're not going to do it anymore, right? So if you take some time off and you're like, I'm spending a little less money, but I'm having a freaking blast doing this, this, and this, you might not ever come back to racing. So I think that if a person's in a race, you just kind of keep on rolling. And when you decide the time's done, then the time's done, and maybe do a Brett Favre deal and retire 3-4 times or whatever. But that's a tough one. I get his validity because it's like the money and all that, but racers are pretty resourceful. They always kind of find a way to make it happen for the most part. But taking some time off, I think multiple things. You get rusty, technology changes, things change, and if you find other things to do, you might not go back. So that's a good question that he had there. Did he have any? What's your thoughts on that, Bert?
No, I mean, I agree. Like I said, racers are racers, and they're not going to want to take a few years off to replenish, because they're not going to replenish. I mean, they're not going to put money in the bank to save up to race. Let's just say that.
Right.
They'll find other things to spend their money on.
Yeah, that's a dangerous game. You don't want to do that. So, and I got one more question here. So Jared sent me a question and was talking about different racetracks and schedules and classes. And we noticed that there's some tracks over the years that have dropped their starter classes, right? And they're like, well, we don't have enough drivers. It's no sense even having that. And I'm not going to name the track, so I'll be talking about some of that on our recap shows. But starter classes is an essential part of a race program. You got to have something for new people to get into. And when these tracks drop the starter class, their reason usually is, well, we just don't have enough drivers even in the class, so why even bother with it? Well, is it the fact that there's not enough people interested in that class, or is it the fact that there's not enough young people even at the racetrack to be interested in that starter class? See, if you're not having young people in the grandstands, young family, kids, who the heck is going to be in the starter classes? If it's all 70-year-old people in the grandstands, they ain't going to be like, hey, I'm going to get a Hornet, So promoters, and I get it, it's tough, but promoters got to do a better job of getting new people to the racetrack and families and kids. So that way you have some future people to get into those classes. Do they have a starter class over in Shawano?
Oh, they have a 4-cylinder division, and then it would be the IMCA Sport Mods, which when they were introduced,
that ain't a starter.
Well, I was just gonna say when they were introduced as a starter class, but they're really not a starter class.
Not anymore. How the 4-cylinders, Bert? What kind of turnout do they get? Do they get pretty good car count for that? Young people get girls? What?
I would say probably, probably about 15 a week.
Okay. That's not bad. That's two solid heats. I've seen some tracks get 25, 30 of them, and I've seen some tracks get 5. And it's like, if you're a track, okay, and I'm going to end it with this. If you're a track promoter out there right now, and your starter class only has 4 or 5 drivers in it, and that class been there for a couple of years, okay, don't look at the class. It's not the class. Look at the grandstands. And when you look at the grandstands, look to see how many kids, how many young families, how many new people, right? Look to see what that number looks like. If you want to build the numbers in that starter class, start by building the numbers of those people in the grandstands so they can become interested in it.
Well, I agree, but also if a track is going to add a starter class, they need to add a starter class that other area racetracks are racing. You can't have a starter class where the only place they can race is at your racetrack. Just for an example, I mean, this was probably 10 years ago. The Manitowoc Speedway, which is no longer in existence, they started a starter class of trucks. NASCAR has trucks, so let's have a truck division. And they actually built a truck and gave it away in a raffle or something. Well, guess how many trucks were there the first week?
2?
One. The one they gave away in the raffle.
Oh boy. So they didn't really promote it very well then either. So that and that depends on location, Bert, too. I mean, if you're in an area of a big population, like let's use Proctor and Superior, Duluth area, 250,000 people. Well, there's 2 tracks there. Obviously, those 2 tracks want to have the same starter class. They're right next to each other. Why wouldn't you? You just got to cross the bridge to go to the other one. But if only one of those tracks existed, let's say that it was only Proctor and Superior wasn't even a track, well, you don't need to have the track an hour away have the same one, because a lot of times them starter classes, they only race their home track anyway. Build within the community. Don't rely on people from all these out of town places to fill in your grandstands and your pits. You need to build the culture within your own community. And I think Shawano's got a pretty good culture over there. A lot of racers right from the Shawano area, isn't there?
Oh yeah. I mean, Shawano's got a tradition. I mean, they've been racing for more than 50 years at the racetrack. So yeah, there's a good racing culture in the community.
Perfect. Well, let's jump on to the next one here. Who's hot? Who's not? Brought to you by, well, I can tell you who's hot, Bert. Who's hot? Impact Health Sharing. That's who's hot. If you got to pay for your own health care, if you have employees, you got to cover theirs. If you don't have health care because it costs too much, I might be able to save you some money. 218-969-1380. Message me on Facebook, whatever you want to do. But Impact Health Sharing offers a product that typically is going to way reduce the cost of what you're paying for healthcare. And that's a good thing. You can use that money for other things like, I don't know, racing, for example, instead of spending it on healthcare. So Impact Health Sharing, get a hold of me, see if I can maybe help you out. Bert, what do you got? Who's hot?
Well, I'll steal yours. I mean, obviously, we've talked enough about him as being in the not hot list, so we'll add him to the hot list this week. Brandon Shepard. He finally got a victory, but he was also in contention, challenging for more victories other than the one that he did get.
He legitimately could have went 3 for 3 on the weekend. And then the MLRA action here a couple weeks ago, he probably would have won there. I think he got a flat tire leading or something like that. So a second, and a first for Bishop. I tell you what, man. I mean, he's a class act. It is so good seeing him back in victory lane. He's one of those people easy to cheer for. He races hard. He's clean, but he's super just down to earth guy. So tip of the cap right there, Brandon Shepard. Congratulations. Any more on the hot list for you?
I'll put Chad Simpson on the hot list. He had a good weekend racing MLRA. He got a victory and I think a second.
One night it was Chad first, Chris second. The other night it was Chris first, Chad second. So yeah, the Simpsons had a pretty good weekend. I'm gonna go with the Silver Bullet, Dean Larson, Mod 4 action in Wissota Racing. 4 for 4, not a bad way to start the season. Tell you what, off to a pretty good start. He's retired, so he's traveling a bit. And Dan Ebert, first and a second this weekend. I said over on the 5 wins or more this year in USMTS action. He's partway there already, leading the points. So Dan Ebert took him a couple of years to kind of find something, but I tell you what, he's going to be strong all year long. Who's not?
Well, I only have one on my not list, and that's Mother Nature. She's not hot.
Yeah, Lucas Oil Dirt Late Model Series would agree with you.
And I mean, the weather is cold, and I mean, we had snow flurries this morning on May 1st.
It snowed today, Bert. I'm in Pennsylvania right now, parked in the truck. It snowed today. I'm like, this is awful.
I mean, parts of northern Wisconsin were supposed to get a foot of snow last night. I don't know if they actually did or not, but
that sounds hideous. That's what that sounds. So I got a couple here, Bert. I got Donnie Schatz. He ended the year last year, Bert. We're like, boy, I tell you what, if he can start out like he ended, he's gonna be golden. Bert, in his last 8 events, he only has one top 10. One top 10, it was an 8th. In 18 shows this year, he's ran 18 shows in the sprint car, right? 1 podium. 1. It was a second with the All-Star sprints at the beginning of the year in Volusia. He hasn't even sniffed the podium yet.
No, I mean, you watch those features, and I mean, he's nowhere to be seen.
One of the best to ever strap in, or it's painful. It's painful. He didn't forget how to drive. The guy's 10-time World of Outlaw champion. You don't forget how to race. You do forget how to be hungry, right? He ain't hungry anymore. Not that he don't want to win, but there's a whole different level to like, I want to win to like, I'm going to freaking win. He had that hunger. He's got to watch Rocky. He's got to get the eye of the tiger back. That's what he's got to do. I want to see Schatz competing for wins here. And maybe he'll come out. Didn't he win the Knoxville Nationals last year?
Yeah.
So he's going to kind of suck it up all year long, win the million. Is that kind of how that's going to work? Or I mean, wouldn't shock me. Right. So Donnie Schatz. The other one I have is the Rocket Man, Rodney Sanders. He's been kind of sniffing around the lead there for a little bit, but he's winless in USMTS action since August 13th of last year. He won at the I-70 Speedway in Odessa, Missouri. So Rodney Sanders literally struggling to find pay dirt. So I'm going to put him on the not hot list as well. So last week, our picks were, we picked the Mars late model race, the races at Brownstown, Turbo, Tyler Erb. He kind of Bishop threw a haymaker slider at him with about 2 to go, and he overshot it, jumped the cushion. Turbo went on to win. None of us had Turbo. Jeff had Bishop. He got second. At Falls, #Falls, Fairbury, the Moequa Missile, Shannon Babb holding off a late charge from Bishop again. Mike and Brad both had Shannon Babb, so 2 points for them. And at Red Hill Raceway Sunday night, Bishop finally hit pay dirt after 40 nights of not winning. He finally got it done. Kurt and Dan had Ryan Unzicker, who got fourth. They each got a point there. USMTS Modifieds, they were at the Hamilton County Speedway, Webster City, Iowa, night 3, the 10,000. Of course, the night that paid the most, that one rained out, Mother Nature not cooperating. But Dan Ebert on night 1, and nobody had Ebert, but Mike and Carl had Rodney Sanders, who we just talked about. He did get second, point for them. Tom Berry Jr., I had him both nights. Bert should have won the first night, but if the queen had balls, she'd be the king, right? So I did not almost, but not quite almost enough. So I had TBJ on night 2, as did Brad. So we each got the win there. World of Outlaw Sprint Car action, Bert. Tri-City Speedway over in Granite City, Illinois. David Gravel parking it in Victory Lane. Kurt, Kent, Bam, Jeff, Bert, you all had Macedo. Nobody had Gravel, which is weird, right? Nobody had Gravel. Y'all had Macedo. He got fourth. You each got a point. And at Tri-State, Brady Bacon, the Macho Man, parking it in Victory Lane. None of us had Brady Bacon. Oh, he's a good racer. We just didn't pick him. Mike, myself, and Carl all had the Big Cat Brad Sweet, who got third. And then the High Limit Sprint Cars, it feels like it's forever ago, Bert. The High Limit Sprint Car Series last Tuesday at 34 Raceway, the 39 of Anthony Macri, Mike, Kent, Brad, Carl, and Bert. All you had Kyle Larson, who got third. Tried to throw a haymaker at the end and actually lost the spot, but you each got a point nonetheless. So that's last week's picks. And right now our pick'ems, our standings. Jeff is leading. I mean, if they're going to get all that snow up there in Michigan, we might as well let them have the lead in the points. Got to do something to make them feel good. Kurt is at 44. Mike jumped past me here. Mike skipped ahead of me. He's at 43. I'm at 42. Big Bad Brad at 38. Bert, you're at 36. Striking distance there. I think Kent is at 36 also. Dan's at 34, and Carl's over 20 at 21. Bert, this week we are going to pick the races for the High Limit Sprint Car Series. They were going to run Tuesday. Now they're running Wednesday. That's at Kokomo. World of Outlaw Sprint Car action Friday and Saturday at Eldora. World of Outlaw late model action, we're only going to pick the Saturday portion of the Dairyland Showdown at the Mississippi Thunder Speedway. Lucas Oil Dirt Late Model Series. Do we even bother? Is it going to rain? Or I mean, they don't even race that series anymore. We'll pick them, I guess. But Atomic, Ponderosa, and Florence. Bert, who did you pick for Florence?
Well, you know who I picked.
Did you pick old Mr. Florence, human highlight reel himself?
Yeah.
All right.
I'll be talking about that in our cold predictions.
Me too. All right. And USMTS mods, Lakeside, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say I have to give out a donkey award for last week. I don't know if I should give it to Bobby Pierce or give it to myself. Well, Bobby Pierce and Shannon Babb, because I picked Bobby Pierce for the first 2 Mars races and he didn't show up. And then I picked Shannon Babb for the 3rd race and he didn't show up for the 3rd race after winning the 2nd race. So
I texted both of them. I said, "Where were you?" And they said, "Bert." Literally, Bert picked us. Screw Bert. Bert won 2 times in a row in these pick'em deal. We ain't gonna win a 3rd one. We're not even coming. We're not taking a chance that everybody else is going to DNF. Screw Bert.
I mean, Pierce did have it on his schedule where it was tentative, but I guess by him not showing up for these races, see, I always thought he would drop off the World of Outlaw Tour at some point during the season and race closer to home in these types of races, but I'm starting to think that he may stay on the tour the entire season.
Yeah, you know what? It looked like rain too. I mean, Fairbury ended up pushing it up an hour. You know, they rained out half the show. They got the mods and the lates and everything else rained out. So I wonder if he kind of looked at that and said, you know what? We're not even going to bother getting up there, getting rained out. You know, 5,000 to win. He's racing for 50 this weekend. So it's kind of disappointing because, I mean, Bobby Pierce sells tickets, but it's good to see Brandon Shepard have a good week. So I guess there's a little silver lining in everything. So, Bert, let's jump into the last lap. And this week brought to you by our friend Mason Aaron. Mason Aaron's videos. Check out his stuff on YouTube, Facebook. And huge thanks to him. He does the editing for all of our content, all of our shows. You know, I know that takes a lot of time because I used to do it. And I quite honestly, probably, I don't know if we'd be even doing the show if we didn't have him here helping us. So a big shout out to him. And Bert, he has some really, really cool stuff. I mean, he creates a lot of like B-roll type content behind the scenes. I mean, if you haven't seen his stuff online, it's worth a look. He does a lot for the sport. Really good guy. So thanks a lot to Mason Aaron there. So Bert, late model guy from Wisconsin, making the trip down to Illinois here.
Oh yeah, Taylor Scheffler. He won down at Farmer City. What was that on Friday night?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Because Saturday he went to Fairbury. I don't know how he did there.
He made the feature at Fairbury, and he was running in the top 10 later in the race, so I think he did fairly well. But he likes to go down and race at those tracks in northern Illinois. And I interviewed him a couple of years ago for a story, and with that story, I interviewed his dad too. And his dad said that he wants Taylor to go race in northern Illinois and race against those drivers because those are some of the best drivers in the Midwest.
He's sporty, man. I tell you what, I remember a race a couple of years ago at Plymouth. I think him and Nick were side by side in that deal. He was hustling on the high side. Taylor Scheffler's a wheel. He's a really good racer. I'd love to see him follow the whole Wabam Dirt Kings series and see if he could have a little something there for the 15. That would be really, really good, but I don't know if he'll commit to that or not. So another thing in news, Minnesota racing news, Granite City Motor Park in Sauk Rapids, Minnesota, Bert, they announced some really, really cool shit here this weekend. They posted, we've talked about this on the show, right? What can we do to get drivers to buy in to track championships? What can we do to get more of that like local racing back? Well, they did it. They actually announced that they're going to have a significant point fund, and you can jump on their Facebook to get the numbers, but they're throwing out some big money here for point funds for all of their classes, Bert. I'm talking, I think $2,500 to win for one of the classes. You'd have to look there. I did not write down exactly the numbers. You can just go to Granite City Motor Park on Facebook, but they, James Trantina and the gang, literally taking money and putting it towards the track points, trying to get drivers from the area to buy more into racing weekly races. On top of that, they posted their pay, very, very good payout, just the regular pay. They're paying heat races. Alexandria and Ashland both pay heat races as well. But the heat race winners, like in the modifieds and supers, for example, $100 bill for winning the heat, hard charger bonus money every single night. So, for example, in the super stocks, it's $400 to win every night, $100 to win the heat, and $100 for the hard charger. You could walk out of there $600 to win every single night in the super stock division, and most places pay like $350, $400. So, throwing some extra money around back to the drivers. So, tip of the cap there to Brian and James and the folks over at the Granite City Motor Park. So, did you see the news today, Bert? Speaking of throwing more money around, did you see what the old XR Super Series announced here?
I did not see what they announced.
Kokomo was supposed to be, I believe, $50,000 to win, I think is what it was going to be. They bumped it this next race at Kokomo for the XR Super Series, $100,000 to the winner, throwing more money at it. And now I think that jumps it from $500,000 to $600,000 to win or more late model shows. 4 of them, Bert, XR Super Series events. So 4 pretty big paydays there for the late model guys, and just more money. And really didn't need to. I mean, if you're paying $50,000, you're going to probably get the same cars, but that's more money in the pockets of the racers. That can't be a bad thing. You talked about it already. You said the Simpsons kind of dominated in MLRA action. Jake Tim had a legit shot to win, and I think he melted a tire, crossed it up. I think he ended up 5th or whatever. He was looking really good. One of them nights kind of really led a big chunk of that race and faded at the end. So kind of a tough break for him. Another thing here, Bert, blast to the past. We just got done before this show You know, we jumped on, friends of mine, Chad and Clint Larson, have been friends with them for, oh man, for a long time, since the early 90s. So like 30 years, and very, very good friends. And it was episode 75. So if you haven't had a chance, check out the Blast of the Past episode. It was super fun. And let's get into the bold predictions for the week. So first of all, Bert, off the board, you had one come off the board this week. You said Jake O'Neill was going to win a pair of US MTS races this weekend. He came from like 24th up into the top 5 on night 2. He was, I mean, it's Jake O'Neill, right? So he was fast, but you got that one wrong. Bert, I had 4 come off the board this week. 4.
Well, before you go on, I should have brought this up during the Who's Hot. Jake O'Neill was hot the first night racing this last week. You know what?
Yeah, he ignited that one. That was up in a ball of flames. That, I mean, cool picture, but it looked expensive. That did not.
Yeah,
look
I mean,
good.
the entire, for those who didn't see it, the entire underside of the car from the engine all the way back was engulfed in flames.
Yeah, that didn't look pretty at all. So I said Ogilvy was going to get at least one event in before May 1st. Nope. I said one driver out of all the races that we picked this past weekend, at least one of those drivers was going to double up. Dan Ebert, you kind of messed me up there because TBJ was going to have that deal. I feel like that's a bad beat. Like, I had that deal locked until the last lap, and I guess Dan just wanted it more, so that one was wrong. I said the high side hustler, Jason Fager, was going to get a pair of podiums. I should have said a pair of top 5s. So close, yet so far away. I said Wasota was going to have a press release about tires before May, by May 1st. Bert, they did. Went out to all the tracks. I don't know if that all the drivers got it, but all the promoters got it. So they issued a press release. In that press release, they said that there are certain products out there that they've been doing some testing on that they really don't want drivers using on their tires. I don't know where that came from. Just I'm speculating here. They didn't mention any names of the products or whatever. So, but needless to say, that one was correct. I get a point there. So we got one more guy that picked one here. So Jeff, we had to go to a jury of our peers here. Okay. So Jeff, who helps a lot with the agenda, he does a lot for the show. Good buddy of mine. And he had a prediction here a while back. He said, if you put a dot on Green Bay, and then you draw a line across to Minneapolis over to Aberdeen, South Dakota, and you just draw a straight line across there, okay, ending at both points. He said there will be no dirt racing north of that line before May 1st. Bert, the sandbox at the Cedar Lake Speedway is a dirt track. They ran go-karts on dirt in an oval, green flags, checkered flags, winners, losers, right? That was an actual viable race on dirt before May 1st, north of that line. Some people on the group disagreed. They said that don't even count. That's go-kart racing. Y'all hate kids. Go-kart. If you're a kid out there watching the show, hey, your go-kart racing's real racing. Don't disregard what some of these haters have to say. Okay. But the vote came in by one vote. The deciding vote, by the way, for that deal, Jeff's brother, Carl, was a deciding vote. And he voted that, that counts as dirt track racing. So as pissed, Jeff actually even sent me the deal with him getting it right. It's like, dude, we had the vote. He got it wrong. So fans, based on that, he said there will be no dirt track racing north of that line before May 1st. The jury of peers decided that by majority rule, they decided that the go-kart race at the sandbox north of that line counts. Therefore, he's incorrect. Post in the comments if you agree. if it's overwhelming, if we get a bunch of comments in there saying no, he should be able to count. That shouldn't count. He should be able to get that point. If it's overwhelming, I'm not opposed to overturning that. But it's going to have to be pretty overwhelming. So you're going to have to, if you really feel Jeff deserves a point, post it in the comments on our YouTube page and on Facebook, and we'll see what we can do for old Jeff there. Bert, right now I'm at 31.1% correct, and you're at 47.8. It is still the Bert whooping Ryan's ass segment of the show. So with that said, 3 bold predictions for this week to end this episode. Got to be quantifiable. Got to be something where it's either it did happen or did not. It's got to be something where we can actually distinguish that. We pick 3. Sometimes the fans throw one in as well, the viewers. If you want to add to this segment, post in the comments, shoot us a message, say, hey, I want to add. I got a bold prediction for you. We'll make sure to mention that. But Bert, let's go ahead and start with you. What do you got?
Well, I might as well get this one out of the way. We kind of touched on it earlier. I'll go with Josh Rice will find victory lane in the Lucas Oil Late Model Series race at Florence.
The old Ralph Latham Memorial. All right, well, I'll stick with that theme. Ralph Latham Memorial Race, 15,000 to win. Lucas Oil Dirt Late Model is at Florence. He's really good there, Bert. Really good. But he's not going to finish on the podium this week. Josh Rice will miss the podium at Florence this week.
All right, my second one, I'll go with Flat Bill Hot Child gets one feature win at Eldora.
Old Flat Bill himself. So Sheldon Hoddenchild, Buggy Bobby, is going to win one of the A.
Will win at least one.
At least one. Okay, good catch. Good catch. The Rocket Man, Rodney Sanders. Remember, I just called him out, right? Remember, I just called him out and I said he's on the not hot list. What typically happens, Bert, when we put somebody on that naughty list? They win. So write this down. Rodney Sanders will win at least one USMTS modified A main over the next 2 swings. Lakeside and Deer Creek are the next 2 swings. Deer Creek's the end of May. So there's 3 races at Lakeside, 3 races at Deer Creek. Rodney Sanders will win at least one A main in those events.
Is it a bold prediction to say that there will be racing this weekend at Chattanooga Speedway?
Oh.
I know, I'm kidding. That's not my prediction.
That's about as bold as
the way the weather's been, that is a bold prediction. I am gonna stay local though, and I believe we mentioned this on the show before. Plymouth Dirt Track is only going to be racing late model 6 times this year. Their first event is this coming Saturday. And I'm going to predict that Justin Ritchie will win the first feature of the Super 6 series, which will be this Saturday at Plymouth.
Bert, Dirt Race Central is going to be covering the action from Plymouth this year.
Yeah, I saw that.
FYE.tv.
I saw that.
Dirt Race Central, which is
okay.
It's one and the same. It's one and the same. Yep. So Dirt Race Central will have the action. Excited about that. All right, Bert. I got one last one. I'm kind of coin toss on which to go. This one here, Bert. You know what? I'm gonna go this way. The B1 bomber, Brent Larson. He finished P2 in one of the features a couple years ago at Mississippi Thunder. Whether it's a qualifying feature or the A main, any of the above. So they run Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I think they run a qualifier Thursday, a qualifier Friday, and then they run the A main on Saturday. Out of those 3 events, the B1 Bomber will finish inside the top 10 in one of those races.
Okay.
Do I need to go a little bit more bold than top 10?
It's up to you.
I'm gonna let you call it. If you think that's satisfactory, I'm gonna keep it there.
You can do it. I had some low hanging fruit.
All right, I'm gonna go top 10 there for the B1 Bomber. Man, I hope it's in the big one. I hope he finishes up on the podium. I'd love to see old Brent perform well at home on his home turf again.
I was checking schedules this morning, and Marlar didn't have Mississippi Thunder on his schedule, so I don't know.
It's kind of weird though, right? Because I was talking to Dan about that.
Drivers have been known to show up to races even though it's not on their schedule.
So Dan went to Knoxville. He goes to Knoxville every year for the late model nationals, and they have if you've never been, I've been to the late model nationals once, but I didn't know they have this. They each time, I think it's on that Saturday morning, they have like a round table deal where they'll get a driver in, and it's usually not very many people, under 100 people, and it's kind of like an interview in front of the fans. And Marlar kind of talked about he doesn't really put a schedule out there too terribly much, because it's kind of like, if I feel like we're doing really good, I want to keep rolling, I might show up there, and if we need a little bit of a break, we might not show up there. So a lot of times Marlar doesn't put a lot of stuff out there. It's just kind of like however he's feeling that day, it seems like. So that's what Dan had to say.
I was going to pick him, but I couldn't risk it based on my 3 drivers not showing up last weekend.
Well, you might as well go ahead and give it a shot, man. What you got to lose? Give it a whirl. Pick them. So yeah, I picked the Smooth Operator. That was my.
So did I.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Okay. That was gonna be, but I figured, man, that would have been bold. I mean, I kind of felt like throwing on out there. Bobby Pierce will win $50,000 at Mississippi Thunder, but I don't really want to jinx them. I'd like to see the Smooth Operator park in victory lane, so I'm gonna leave that one off the pick there. Maybe I just say Bobby Pierce not hot. Maybe that'll get it done. We'll find out. So, Bert, always fun. We had a hell of a long day here. We did a couple shows back to back. I know you got to work in the morning, as do I. But race fans, I'm Ryan Aho. That is the Bert Lehman. Thanks for tuning in to the One to Go Show.